Welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Realm Podcast and YouTube channel. On today's episode, we continue the lecture series on Caribbean thought by Professor Renaldo McKenzie at Jamaica Theological Seminary. The lecture is delivered via the Zoom platform and is available for free on the Neoliberal Realm Podcast to provide exposure to those with limited access to collegiate education and training, and to promote critical thinking. The lecture is part of an actual class course where students from all over the world are engaged in a semester-long class with an exam at the end. Here is week 3, lecture 5, and remember to subscribe, share, and like us.
Hey guys, my computer died. Are you guys still there?
Yes, sir.
So I was making the point, who is the post-colonial? Who is the post-colonial? According to Franz Fanon, of which the Caribbean is also part of the post-colonial. Okay, the post-independent, the post-colonial. The colonial is a global creature. Sorry, the colonial man is a political. Talk about political football. Talk about political creature. A political creature. We talk about politics. You talk about the issue of strategy. Colonial man is a political creature. Creature created through the systems and through strategy. The colonial, according to Fanon, is the black man, black and brown man. He is a political creature in the most global sense of the term. Global. Wherever, okay, he is a creature. He is trapped in an identity that is created for him, and so he is alienated. The colonized man is a global creature, so he is controlled. And again, here we go. The issue of control comes up again. The issue of control comes up again. Sorry, I was sharing my screen. Here we go. And so Descartes talks about the idea of being aware. Socrates talks about the unexamined life is not worth living. That's critical thinking right there. Okay, the unexamined life is not worth living. Everyone talked about the being aware. And of course, Franz Fanon saying that we must we must cut the black man, the colonizer must be position. And Kenneth B. Clark talks about the position of the dark ghetto. I said to you, but wherever you find black rising, there is always a clash by the status quo, an attack against black wealth, generational wealth. Okay, when you look at Wall Street and when you look at what pertained in Jamaica and the Caribbean, especially the 1960s when they were on a part of development and growth, suddenly Jamaica had to upgrade its system and depreciate its currency, so on and so forth. Of course, okay, utilizing an appeal to an economic philosophy. That puts an idea that benefits there. So, Jamaica had to depreciate their currency. It's natural that they had to do it because so that it corresponded with a kind of economic theory that benefits who, that privilege who, that supports what idea. idea of strategy. Okay, strategy that had confounded and was beyond Caribbean, uh, the colonized, the post-colonial, and that is why it's important to do critical thinking. Okay, so that we don't make the same mistakes and we don't do the same things. Critical thinking is important to some alternate studies and to this particular study. We cannot escape the subjective. And this is how we make sense of our reality based on what, when we talk about subjective, that is opposite of objective. So Descartes and the idea of the subjective reality is part of the understanding of critical thinking. Where we get the subjective as this is how we make sense of the that leads to his reality within the totality of what is true and how one may act truth of instant. You will go back and watch the tape and then you'll understand what I'm saying, because Descartes had written cogito ergo sum, which means what? I think, therefore I am. That's what he thought. I think, therefore I am. Descartes was ambivalent and perplexed about the reality of existence, and he sought to abandon all things and start afresh from nothing. Because he said nothing, but he said that he was trying to make sense of truth. How do I really know what exists? He said that, well, the fact that he said, I'm going to start from saying nothing is true. Nothing exists. I'm going to start from that. Because he is trying to make sense of reality. Logically, he's trying to make sense of reality. So he said, okay, I'm going to say that Descartes, I'm going to say that nothing exists and start from that. But then he's left with the fact that his mind is thinking that nothing exists. So he cannot deny that his mind is thinking that nothing exists. And because he cannot deny that his mind is thinking that, the only he is left with the reality of the mind as the only thing that he is certain of. It is within himself and his mind. So therefore, what is true is that we are only certain of that is within us, and that is of our reality and the understanding of the experience of that reality. Even the stimuli and the revelations, that is godly. It is also the way we understand it and the way we make sense of it. It is through, according to Descartes and his method of coming to terms with his reality, it is by something that is purely within himself, and he reflects that. Nevertheless, he discovered the difficulty of doing so, as he must acknowledge that something is thinking from the start to do what he's setting out to do. So he concluded that the thing that is thinking is the mind, therefore one cannot deny its very existence. On the other hand, his proof of existence does not go beyond one's reality, for one cannot understand any existence outside of one's mind and reality. Therefore, it behoves us to engage in relationship facilitated by communication, which spurs life dynamic. That's why you have iMessages. People develop iMessages through this same exercise that stems all the way from Descartes. Okay. Okay, one of the ways of because we on the psychology or the iMessage through which the psychological method comes from understanding the fact that we can't blame others for how we are feeling. Okay, because we all have different perspectives. You have one stimuli, but how you react to stimuli is dependent on your context and your training and your experience. So you may get one stimuli, you interpret it one way, and it affects you in another way. And somebody else get that same stimuli and they interpret it one way and they express it another way. It comes from that That's okay, and that's what Kant is also talking about. History is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances. Oh, okay, we talk about being aware of the subjective critical thinking, understand that. So therefore, okay, but the post-colonial understand that we live in a society that has all that has universalized and also created cultures with norms and values and a system that prioritizes certain morals and values and ways over others that creates statuses and classes in society. Okay, kind of part of what we have as culture is part of understanding within the subjective, which have become normal, which has been universalized and become normalized without facilitating any any external reality or interpretation and reality within the subjective. So then, therefore, if it is privilege, it is then lauding a particular experience over another. So then we talk about whether or not culture or theology, whether theology should transcend culture, and how its Caribbean people, especially that is influenced by European Christianity, that priority that that has that has a kind of caveat that ensures compliance that says I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father except through me. In other words, it is on. We talk about the idea Christianity, Christianity is dependent on a relationship with Christ, but that's Christianity. But Christianity is the ideal. The idea of the ideal comes out of that same system of privilege, colonial history of humanity, the history of power, the history of colonization, okay, of universalizing and colonizing a particular experience and ideal. And quite interesting, the development of critical thinkers, the development of critical thinkers. So, so of course, the key points to take away from this, from slide 4, as it relates to Descartes and the subjective reality within critical thinking, as we begin to consider, as we begin to reflect on diverse currents that have come to shape Caribbean life and society, and how we are, and the kind of future we will have in the future. Understanding that we said that Caribbean have had a mixed past, hybridized, detached. Talk about Caribbean's beauty. Yeah, it's paradise, but not many, a lot of people within inside the Caribbean don't enjoy the kind of paradise that people outside of the Caribbean enjoy, and the world is created in such a way where people outside of the Caribbean can see that paradise and enjoy the paradise. Okay, be treated as kings and queens because of the dynamic of their socio-economic position and the power of their dollar, the power of their currency, because the dollar is stronger. And of course, what does that say about someone's position in relation to somebody else? But anyway, so Descartes. So it's very important when we start to look at Descartes, and the critical thinking is being important because now we begin to understand, now we begin to get into the course and understand the course more. So I think therefore I am very important uh, 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 concept that from Descartes. We are talking about the reality of existence, the knowledge of his reality of his existence begins with the mind and is only certain within the mind, which speaks to one's awareness. The psychoanalytic theory is influenced from Cartesian. There's an influence between the kind of Cartesian phenomenology within critical thinking process. It speaks to the relationship between communication and life dynamics. Um, okay, so now those are the main points from this slide here. The next slide looks at the development of critical thinkers. And when we talk about the development of critical thinkers, that's very important. Critical thinkers like Michel Foucault and Immanuel Kant were not born. I would say that critical thinking is a skill and vocation developed over time. Critical thinkers are iconoclasts. Iconoclast means image breakers. Again, iconoclasts, the word iconoclast means image breakers. I don't think I'll be able to present it in this class, but I do a course at Georgetown looking at liberal studies 1, 2, and 3, looking at the foundations of Western civilization. And it's a very important class, and I think you guys should be exposed to the foundation of Western civilization. Okay? Very important because it will now help you. And I noticed that, I don't know if a lot, in terms of Caribbean education, a lot of Caribbean education, depending on the kind of exposure you have in the Caribbean, will affect your exposure to Greek and Latin and so on. You're exposed to some of these educational truths or this kind of ideas will really also broaden your understanding and your perspective. It's really quite powerful. But I learned about the idea of iconoclast while doing my doctoral studies, Liberal Studies Foundation 1. I never knew about the idea of iconoclast until I started exposing myself to the idea of iconoclast. The idea of iconoclast is important because it talks about, earlier I read, I don't know, some of you couldn't hear it, but I read from Homer's Iliad, and I talk about it. The Iliad is one of the earliest pieces of material or writing that people have predating Greek life and so on and so forth. It talks about a war between the Achaeans and the Persians, or the Trojans and the Achaeans and so on. And it talks about but the book talks about how the Greeks were disciplined and or the Persians were not, and so on and so forth. Privileging, or the book, you could tell that the idea of privilege existed from as far back as in the Greco-Roman world. And then I said, the Roman traditions, but it's based on some kind of Roman traditions. And they said that the war that Homer talks about was a war that was a war over some a revenge over some woman, and then others say it's about something else. But whatever the case is, and you study history, we talk about iconoclasts. However, say for example, image breakers, people like Herodotus and Thucydides, Sappho and Pindar, and later Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. If you look at from Greco-Roman world all the way up to Roman, all the way up, there is always this image breaker. They are changing the image of something, a dynamic image within a particular tradition, within a society. Okay? So I won't talk about it right now in this class because I don't want to confuse you, but it's a very important concept, the idea of image breakers, and Herodotus and Thucydides and Sappho and Pindar and Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, they challenge reflections every different period. They challenge reflections of past Greek knowledge of today. Every time you read these various from in one period to the next philosopher to the next philosopher, they all depart from another one. And in a sense, Thucydides and Socrates and Plato, they all departed from Homer's Iliad and Hesiod's Theogony, the two persons, the original persons in Greek mythology or philosophy. The foundation of most make of the tradition, and I talk about the Episcopal Church or the Reformation and how the Church, the Catholic Church, or the breakaway and so on and so forth. Even in history, the way we see, even say for example, the way we see Christianity today, The Jews, everybody wanted to be a Jew, or the Jews were privileged. They had religion. The Gentiles, they couldn't be in that society, the first 100 years of Christianity. Everybody couldn't be a Jew. Yeah, in order for you to enjoy the benefits of being a Jew, you have to have it by birthright. And then the Jews had certain cultural practices that defined their culture as a Jew. You know, the Torah was not necessarily a religious book, but it was a cultural book talking about Jewish society and Jewish life. And because the Jews wanted to preserve their identity and they were distinct from any other people. And the rabbis, who we see as religious folk today, leaders, at the time weren't just religious, but they were keepers and preservers of the culture. They wanted to preserve that Jewish culture, preserve the Jewish identity. Okay? As the Jewish society spread and as society changed over time, and of course the Greeks and the Gentiles and the society mixed and mingled. But the Jews in those society, by the time the Greco-Roman world became the Greco-Roman world, transitioning from Greek to those in the Greco-Roman world and Latin world, you know, the Jews occupy a very important religious position in the world. They were privileged. Then Jesus comes on the scene. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man come to the Father except to me. Now, Jesus here, and Jesus would argue with his Jewish brothers. He was saying, calling his brethren and his disciples Jews. And he said, yes, they are Jews. They are not Jews because of birthright, because they can't be Jews because they're not born into it. But they are Jews because they believe on me. Once they believe me, then they are Jews. It's like a marriage. It's like a marriage that exists. Marriage that exists between the birthright. And so Jesus expanded to Gentiles and the people who could not claim the benefits of being Jews of the day, which was the privileged position. What he did, well, of course, he said, well, if they believe in me and practice what I believe, and did, and even went as to die for them, so by virtue of the fact that they follow me, believe me, and so on, then now they can be called Jews. They can be called Jewish. Now get some of the benefits and some of the reputational value. I mean, of course. What am I talking about? I'm talking about thinking and be thinking about. So, okay. The foundation of most major religions today stem from a break of tradition, such as the Reform or the Reformation of the Dark Ages, leading to the period of enlightenment and free thinking. This led to inventions, innovations, and the Protestant Church, which had broken ties with the Catholic Church, especially on the basis that all men, and not just the Pope or the privileged, had access to God. This allowed for the official translation of scriptures in a common tongue, regardless, and of course, regardless, the ability to read sacred writings in a particular language was given greater credence for those with such training or exposure to maintain a particular privilege over thought. So there was, okay, so this is very important that we talk about development of critical thinking. With his Socratic school of thought, Machiavelli, and his Manichaean society, Aristotle, and his new epistemology, Socrates, which led to various branches of modern thought that created a civil society based on rules and laws and guided by the principles of institutional religion and science. There's also Gramsci, Marx, and the dynamics of society. Of course, Gramsci and Marx, in his printed notebooks, Gramsci explained the privilege of thought within intellectualism. which he, like Foucault and other post-structuralist and postmodernist thinkers, had derided as a form of institutionalism that portends the privilege in society. So the tension in our created societies give rise to the dynamics in society between races and classes, which are said to be spaces for the dominant toward a particular constant. Karl Marx challenged society's economic history concerning wealth accumulation within societies. He reimagined a utopic society of equal beings without class, status, or kin, which differs from Plato's Republic and the Aristotelian view, which occupies much of the West and to a lesser degree Eastern. Of course, because I just want to make this point quite clear. I said to you last class or the class before this, Adam Smith, if you guys read economic theory, Adam Smith has talked about capitalist societies in which a lot of the Caribbean countries follow a kind of capitalist or mixed economic kind of a practice, or dependent capitalist states or emerging economies within the Western societies, except Cuba or one or two communist states. Majority of the Caribbean is follows a kind of capitalist economic system. Very important. And when you look at this idea, which comes from when you look at people like from the post-industrial or capitalist societies, when you look at the philosophy behind it, you have to read people like Max Weber talk about the protected ethic and the spirit of capitalism. He theorized that the idea behind capitalism and the output and the hard, it stems from the idea of hard work leading to salvation, working hard to salvation. And of course, talk about Adam Smith. Adam Smith talk about the accumulation of capital, which is part of the wealth that capitalist societies created, is as a result of the scientific system and out of that, and pointing to part of a particular economic theory. But Karl Marx, in his Das Kapital, in his critical thinking, said, no, that's not true. He redid the history of man and said, no, it's as a result of thrift. It's as a result of strategy. And when you start to look at colonialism, when you start to read how Europe underdeveloped Africa, you see what Karl Marx, you understand the idea of critical thinking to the process of post-colonial theory, what we are here talking about. Of course, I talk about Orientalism and Occidentalism, Edward Said and Ian Baruba. Okay, and how the East have ideas about the West, and how the West have ideas about the East, and how that is represented in arts and culture and music, and so on and so forth. And so critical thinking them to dispel, okay, the ideas, the interpretation, the representation in music, in dance, in drama, in culture. Okay, and that is why now I talk about people, Holy Baba talk about V.S. Naipaul, and people like Kamal Brathwaite and so on, who know, and poets and people like Louis Bennett, Bob Marley, musicians, the calypso, the music, how Caribbean people are now utilizing various representations of themselves, okay, and controlling the narrative, okay, in terms of the books they write. Now they're getting involved in academia, in scholarship. Jamaicans and Grenada or Barbados is now an independent country. Sorry, a real independent country, now independent of Britain because now they got rid of the monarchy. Critical thinking. To do critical thinking is to do analysis. It is metaphysically looking at things. It dissects and does surgery. It is a way of thinking that looks at patterns in action and explores thoughts. It does psychoanalysis, which Sigmund Freud and later Franz Fanon used to present the empowered self. I made a point just now. Oh, I didn't realize that it's this late. Wow, I was supposed to take a break at some point and allow you guys to talk about the groups and people who are in the class for the very first time be able to introduce yourselves. And you have to join a group. If you're not in a group, you have to formulate a group. This week, Wednesday, you guys are the groups are supposed to be presenting. But let me wrap this part of this. And I have to make a very important point that I glossed over earlier. The importance of doing critical thinking, because I talk about within that there are two very important people in post-colonial theory. Okay, Edward Said and Ian Bergman. Edward Said, Orientalism. Okay, and I don't want to, when I talk about the issue of um, representation, the issue of representation. If you ever could buy in your syllabus, you see all the people that I appeal to, it's in your syllabus. I talk about Orientalism. It's a 1970 book by Edward Said in which he establishes the term Orientalism as a critical concept to describe the West's commonly contemptuous depiction and portrayal of the East. In other words, Western society had a portrayal of, say for example, you watch certain Chinese movies that had a, back in, okay, before this promotion, because now we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if you watch certain studies, if you watch certain film by the US or by certain people and races about other people is usually discriminatory or usually contemptuous or a portrayal of something that they are not. When you watch certain movies about India, movies about the black or brown people, the movie about the Caribbean, okay? And sometimes, say for example, have you ever watched certain movies about the Caribbean and you feel uncomfortable? I say, no. That's not how Caribbean people act. No, that's not us. Anyways, but historically, stemming from colonialism, they are always like America would do Superman movies or Tony Rabbit movies. The Superman is always that of the US. Captain America is the US. It's depicting the US because they're using a kind of prose. They're using a kind of figurative language in those films to promote American exceptionalism over others. So, certain movies, you ever see some movies about Russia, it's always negative. It's always negative about, so the depiction, so therefore talk about how in post-colonial theory, people like Homi Bhabha, V.S. Naipaul, so how they are now rethinking the characters, rewriting. That stems from critical thinking. That's why I said to you, it is important. This course is about it's rethinking, it's critical thinking about, okay, how people used to, how the world, between the traditional way of doing things, the conservative way of thinking, of understanding people. Cooley was hardworking. Or the way we talk about Cooley, that's discriminatory. But using the word nigger or seeing Jamaicans as Rastafarians and dirty or lazy. In some instances, one time, some people, Mexicans, as hardworking, or Jamaicans having 10, 15 jobs. There are certain views that the West have about the East. And they put it in movies and in magazines. Michel Foucault talked about knowledge and how institutions and information is created to continue, and knowledge that continues privilege and continues a certain kind of colonialism or control. And of course, the West is also portrayed by the East. And in a sense, some people may think that that's part of the East resistance. Okay? Or when you watch black comedians and how they talk about white people in their comedians and how they are portrayed. So now, no black people or Caribbean people now they have a medium to tell their own story, and now they can portray people as less than themselves. And although that is negative, probably it's part of their resistance. We talk about the book Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty, and Resistance. When certain black men in certain communities wear their pants below their waist, it is part of their resistance in a society, okay, that tries to control their position, that tries to control their look, that tries to control their narrative. It is their protestation. When you start to think critically about their thing, then you can start to think why some people speak, don't care to have subject verb agreement in some of their writings. Why Louise Bennett would publicly embrace the utilization of Creole in her formal presentations. That was her resistance. Okay, because of right. So it says this is deep. This thing is deep. You know. I wonder if you're understanding what's going on here. So we talk about Occidentalism and Orientalism, which is ethnocentric at best. Because ethnocentric because ethnocentrism have to do with value judgment that people make, determination that people make about others based on the values that they have. In societies, value judgments are being made about that we continue to make about ourselves and about people in our own communities based on the colonial past, which continues to hold Caribbean down, or which continue to challenge Caribbean future. We talk about look what's going on with Haiti, look what's going on with in terms of, you know, the colonization was also, it's a multifaceted approach. It's social, it's economic, it's theoretical, it's theological. I said to you, when you look at how Jamaica have allowed our a theology, the kind of theology that we have, to prevent us from pursuing a kind of tourism that involves casino gambling, because the church was against that, stemming from which was a victory from the colonial past, which because that was kind of the multifaceted approach to leave a legacy that continues a kind of theology, a kind of philosophy, a of kind of laws that continue to keep us uncompetitive, so that the control continue. So those who had granted us our freedoms can continue to maintain their hegemony and dynamics in the world. That okay, but is that true? But that is part of doing critical thinking. Okay, but of course it helps us to reconsider, ideas. Say for example, you look at how the professions are changing today, or you look at, okay, let's talk about weed, or marijuana, and how the ideas about marijuana have changed. But okay, those who always had control was able to regulate it. Okay, and how Caribbean countries had started to breed from products like marijuana, but okay, but now, but they allow being part of an international law, okay, to keep, okay, which now, which which now benefits those in the post-industrial, because states like Colorado and many states in the U.S. are making billions of dollars from it, while the Caribbean is trying to catch up now because they have developed sophistication and find ways to mass produce it and so on and so forth. When we were all about trying to prevent Jamaicans from taking it overseas and so on and so forth, while in the post-industrial they were developing the science to make a sophisticated science, and now they have released it. after they are able to dominate and manipulate. I don't, probably that's an idea. No, but that's something you want to think about. To do critical thinking is to do analysis. It metaphysically, when we talk about metaphysics, looks at what is ultimately real about things. And when we talk about what is ultimately real, the difference between metaphysics and ontology looks at what is real, what is in reality. But metaphysics looks at what is behind that, the components. What is the that? Okay, why is it that a clock is a clock? What brings the clock together? It is when you understand that you understand the essence of a thing. That's what metaphysicians say. To do critical thinking is to do metaphysics, really dissecting society. It is metaphysically, physically, it is metaphysically looking at things. It dissects and does surgery. It is a way of thinking that looks at patterns in action and explores thought. Psychoanalysis, which Sigmund Freud and later Franz Fanon used to present the empowered self. You know, Sigmund Freud talked about the ego and the super ego and the alienation of self, which creates ambivalence and abnormality. We talk about society, talk about what's wrong with the black man in society and so on and so forth. And we talk about how he has been alienated and the legacy of that, and even and the de jure and de facto ways of continuing control and colonization and divorcing him from his products, from his stuff, from his creation. More than the white, of course, Franz Fanon talked about, right, the Negro is not more than the white man in Wretched of the Earth, represents an empowered depiction of the black man from an unusually neutral approach that is not top down. This pragmatically, succinctly critical thinking at work, where Fanon is angry. The Negro is not any more than the white man, and you know what? Franz Fanon always, when he writes, he's angry, he's upset, he's suspicious. Of course, there was a lot. He writes in a period where of anti-colonialism and revolutionary wars against capitalism. Okay, so that of course influences writing. But you know, it's quite important when he said the Negro is not an important white man. That's critical thinking at work. He's angry at his colonial masters. And when he wrote that, he was, well, probably ill or about to be ill. But he does not justify man through a binary that puts him in jeopardy of his self outside of any other when he says the Negro is not any more than the white man. He does not justify man through a binary that puts him in jeopardy of himself outside of any other. He does not say that the black man is not less than. Instead, he writes that he is not mere, so he's not more than, and he's not less than. He is, just as though the Rastafarians borrowing from Franz Fanon psychoanalysis, and Bob Marley, who is a great reader, obviously influenced by Franz Fanon, talked about the I and I. Is challenging the usual narrative of language when comparing the post-colonial creature. You know, I don't think I have much time left. There's much more to say because I also want to say that when you look at people like, when I talk about Homi Baba, was intrigued by Fanon and V.S. Naipaul, Baba explained was off-center and on the fringes. But when we talk about critical thinking is developed through training the mind to think in a certain way, as it is explorative thinking. It challenges your thinking and beliefs. It uses logic, common sense, and reason. It benefits from expansive thoughts and sequencing of present and past knowledge. I talk about in the beginning of the class, the first class we did, the sequencing and the fact that you come to the experience with stuff. Of course, you will go back and you will rewatch the tape and you will do further reading. Okay, and you will cross check and sequence. But critical thinking benefits from expansive thought and sequencing, structuring of present and past knowledge. It builds on past information. It is coherent. It is clear. It follows the laws of logic and reason. It disrupts and challenges using. It disrupts and challenges. It is fair and open. It is sharp and it cuts. It goes deeper and deeper. However, it is focused and direct. We're talking about training the mind for critical thinking. Training the mind for critical thinking. It goes deeper and deeper. It is honest and understands its biases. For example, one may conclude that the Caribbean, by saying that the Caribbean has been unable to chart its course since decolonization and realize absolute political independence and economic prosperity. One may say that it's a result of that's a bias. The fact that, okay, based on my probably political bent. But of course, one of the questions you're going to say is that we live in the subaltern and we are affected by the realities of colonization. And when I say to you in the book, what voice do I have as a Caribbean thinker? And what are the threats to that voice in the first part of neoliberalism? What listen, I said, for example, I said one may conclude that the Caribbean by saying that the Caribbean has been unable to chart its course since decolonization and realize absolute political independence and economic prosperity. Is that honest? Or is it from bias? Secondly, one may ask the question, what do you have as a Caribbean thinker? And what are the threats? What voice do you have as a Caribbean thinker? And what are the threats to that voice? Are Caribbean countries genuinely free of the external? And does this illusion of freedom come with competing worldviews? But the idea of worldviews is very important. Okay? Because when you study culture, you're studying worldview is part of culture. It's not studying society, studying a worldview. So, but at the Caribbean, I said to you, based on the fact that we have been influenced, and we say that the Caribbean is an invention, and that based on some of our main thinkers or introductory reflections using Franz Fanon, Homi Bhabha, talking about the Caribbean is a political creature in the global sense. Okay, we talk the Caribbean freedom or independence is putative. Now, but the question of some of the questions that you will ask is, what voice do you have as a Caribbean thinker? What are the threats to that voice? Are Caribbean countries genuinely free of the external? And does this illusion of freedom come within? Does it come within competing worldviews of capitalism and socialism? Various kind of ideas of truth. Philosophies, theologies. What is the issue of bias? Of course, we utilize Kenneth Clark, Dark Ghetto, The Limit of Social Power to help us distill some concepts and explore the question and our thoughts. And of course, in the course, we will utilize the book of Neoliberalism. exploring as we begin to explore some of these broad perspectives and thinking about the Caribbean, putting our critical thinking at work within post-colonialism. Now, as I wrap up, I would say this, that the post-colonial man must be a critical thinker, which is a skeptic, who is suspicious of history and its creation of the past. For Kant, Immanuel Kant, we live in the reality of a history resulting from human natures and circumstances. And of course, Kant's critique of pure reason and practical reason, including Newtonian physics, is the foundation of knowledge, saying that, of course, by the way, let me just pause here. I'm talking about Newtonian physics. And when you look at Newtonian physics really help to form the foundation of knowledge about everything unchanging within Western society, which I think Kant ultimately challenges in a sense, because Newtonian physics would have us think that the world is ordered in a certain way outside of a kind of human understanding of physics. Kant, he critiques pure reason, and he critiques practical knowledge, and he critiques Newtonian physics. Newtonian physics is the basis of some of our theological understanding, our philosophical understanding, the foundation of knowledge within Western civilization. So when Kant says history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances, it's a challenge. He's challenging Newtonian physics. That provides an understanding of the world as if it is outside of the influences of human interpretation and knowledge. And so, again, I harken back to what Andrew talked about, awareness, but a deep awareness, a Socratic awareness and reflection. Now, there are other reflections for this class, but we're going to stop here because there's the issue of decoloniality and critical thinking. Decoloniality emphasizes the need to de-link from colonial matrices of power and thought. Notice I said the word matrices or matrix. You guys watch the Matrix. We talk about colonialism is a matrix. Colonization involves a matrix as a deeply embedded system that is not that is complex and is not easily removed. You watch the movie The Matrix. Matrix is really a reflection of society that is caught in a matrix that is very difficult to unpack. So part of our understanding and reflection in this course is the idea of decoloniality. And last week we said that post-colonialism recognizes that colonization does not end after independence. And so there is a link between the decoloniality and critical thinking. This comes from critical thinking, emphasizing the need to de-link from colonial matrices of power and thought. And if colonialism is a matrix of power and thought, then therefore critical thinking is important to dissect. Yes? It involves questioning and dismantling the epistemological frameworks imposed by colonial powers that we have inherited and that continue to control our dynamics, our interpretation of things, and how we review and our identities. Of course, Bob Marley aptly put it, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. But up to today, we still continue to experience the colonization, whether through international arrangements and so on, or whether through local arrangements with local interference, and so on and so forth. We talk about the issue of relative deprivation. When I get a chance to talk about relative deprivation, because relative deprivation says it's a Marxist materialist theory that says societies that have a high level of crime and violence, like that of Jamaica and many parts of the Caribbean, or formerly independent countries, or sorry, post-independent countries, or a lot of black and brown countries struggle with high levels of crime and violence, and the more blackness and the more demographics of black and brown people that occupy a particular space, the more crime and violence of a certain pedigree you will find. The relative deprivation theory, which is a Marxist materialist theory that says societies that have high levels of crime and violence usually is correlated with societies that have high levels of income inequality and poverty. High levels of income inequality and poverty, which are societies of that are usually post-colonial, or societies that Kenneth B. Clark talks the dark ghetto, or okay. When you start about that, that which is part of what has come to define Caribbean. When you look at Caribbean societies, which struggle with high levels of crime and violence, apart from that of probably St. Lucia or some communities. But wherever you have high levels of income inequality and poverty, it usually correlates with high levels of crime and violence. High levels of crime and violence can be seen in certain pockets within the post-industrial, where you have high levels of black and brown people, okay, or especially and black and brown people are usually characterized as having high levels of poverty, okay, with lack of access and opportunities. And that has exacerbated over the last 10, 15 years. The wealth has exacerbated among people within the post-industrial, or amongst certain demographics and certain peoples. And no matter how you have all these billionaires, black billionaires, or few millionaires, more and more black people are becoming poorer and poorer every day. Okay, and we talk about what is the experience in terms of Caribbean islands, in terms of their economies. They continue to struggle, and especially with a mixed economic reality of instability, which I believe that they're learning now from the mistakes of the past, and they are doing, and I think they are working in terms of they're working more strategically. But there's still the issue of Haiti. There's still the issue of Cuba. There's still the issue of the Organization of American States as against CARICOM, and how these states, there's a conflict of interest, and what interests, who stand to gain the most in Organization of American States as against CARICOM. Now we're gonna have to stop here now. You guys have a presentation. If you are not in a group, I'm gonna ask that you get yourselves in. Is everybody still here? No, you guys have to present. Is there anybody in class that's not in a group today? Anybody in class is not in a group? Hello?
So I guess since there's no response, maybe that is an affirmation to say yes.
By all of you, please get yourselves in a group. Um, uh, if you're not in a group, please let me know, or reach out to Kemori, who is the class leader. Um, Kemori, usually she's I think she's been sending emails from time to time. I really appreciate you, Kemori. And hopefully I will have opportunities to bless you. But thank you so much. But please reach out to Kemori if you're not in a group. The group will have 15 to 20 minutes to present on the Caribbean islands that you guys have. Anything else? But as we wrap up this class today, there's some other ideas that you have to that I didn't talk about. I want to talk about intersectionality in post-colonial thought. I guess we can pick up um, if I have time after the class on Wednesday, because Wednesday we will start to explore islands of the Caribbean, and you guys will get to present and what you island you do present, and I will pick up from there. But there's other. I also want to talk about the rule of memory and narratives. The role of memory and narratives in shaping identity and history. The work of scholars like Paul Gilroy and Stuart Hall. Those explore how collective memory and cultural narratives influence post-colonial identities or Caribbean identities and resistance. The role of memory and narratives. Okay. And that is why now we are reimagining how people think within critical race theory or post-colonial theory, not thinking race, but moving away from a victim approach to a hero approach. Because understanding the power of storytelling and reclaiming narratives from colonial discourse is essential for fostering a more inclusive and different presentation of post-colonial realities. So that is why the arts and cinema is they are very important. Music, all important as we to now reshape our history and tell our story, and to rediscover narratives that promote a future that continues, that helps us to realize that Pan-African dream and that we see. All right, so I'm going to stop right there. That's it for class today. This class will be available. This presentation will be available hopefully soon. You won't get this, but class 1 and 2 is available on the Neoliberal YouTube channel. I'm going to put a link to it on JTS online. Lecture 3 and 4 I'm working on now. That will be available. And when I do the lectures, I also add background music, and I also add resources and pictures and images and diagrams that will also help. So please take a note of that. Fabian, thank you for your participation in the class. April and others of you, Melissa, who have participated. Very good. I like that the back and forth and the questions and the interruptions. That was very good. Some of the ideas, some of you may not be able to ask as yet because you are still assimilating, you're still acclimatizing, you're still trying to get your foot wet. That's fine. Continue to read, expose yourself to post-colonialism and post-colonial theory, expose yourself to reread the syllabus with the description, read the addendum to the theory, to the class. I have written several, I sent you an article last week that looks at what is Caribbean and determines this, and some of the general reflections of Caribbean that Caribbean thought ask, and some of the challenges that we have. Today, last week we defined post-colonialism, and we asked the question and answered the question, what is Caribbean thought and determines this? Today we continue that reflection, looking at critical thinking and why it is important in Caribbean thought and what it involves in the process. Throughout the course, we will continue to do what we'll practically do. We will do critical thinking as we begin to ask certain questions. Next week, Monday, we will have a guest, and who will be presenting for the entire class. He is powerful. He is I think he's an accomplished. I want to talk about music and the arts, but particularly music, Caribbean music as part of Caribbean influence. So next week, Monday, he's going to be talking about Caribbean music. You can ask to develop the history of Caribbean music, the idea of music, and how to thinking critically about music and identity. He's also he's an African American. He's from Trinidad. He will talk about Trinidad music. Trinidad music is a new kind of music. If I ask you what is Trinidad music, do you know what Trinidad is? If you do Caribbean thought and from the Caribbean, you should know what Trinidad is. But if you are, and on Wednesday, some of you are presenting on different. Some of you have Trinidad. I want to know what is Trinidad? What is Trinidad? Okay, he's going to present on Trinidad. You can he's going to talk about music, and of course, he's all, the beautiful thing about this guy is from Trinidad, but he is an Israel. He is a priest, but he's not going to come representing his congregation. Okay, it has to go through a lot of political stuff, but he's going to come and present to the class. But however, he is a priest, a black Jew, and he will tell you that he is the original Jew, but he is an Israeli priest. That's part of a congregation that's very historical, hundreds of years old. They have a large congregation, several different groups throughout, but some of them have congregations in the Caribbean. What similarities do the Jews in Jamaica have with the Jews, that we know, with the other Jews, the white Jews, or the Jews in Palestine that went to Palestine, or the sected? How do we how is it that people know there are people talking about Jews, there are black Jews, and this gentleman from Trinidad, but he is the leader of a congregation here in Philadelphia, and he's a theologian as well, but a different kind, and he has a very unique perspective. Part of it's very important. It's one of the we grow and develop when we expose ourselves to perspective. I'm writing another book called Secrets to Unlocking Divine Intervention, because I want to understand various people's perspective. The Caribbean, do we believe that the Caribbean, as part of our identity, is to be inventive and to create something that is uniquely Caribbean, that does not come from anywhere else but ourselves? Or can one Caribbean person create something and make it Caribbean? Is it really Caribbean because it comes from somebody? Could that person have had an influence from outside of Caribbean, but because it came from him, is it now Caribbean? And what does that say about anything else? Now, when you start to think in these ways, then wow, no, this is the kind of thinking we're talking about. Anyways, okay, guys, anything else we need to consider? Any question? Any food for thought? Any statements from you guys before we wrap up?
Sir,
Yes.
did you look in the chat?
No, I did not. What does it say? Yes. Okay, some of you may want to talk to me. I think one student wants to talk to me. I will be in after class for that student.
Sir?
Wow. Somebody asked the question, does critical thinking always debunk thought? Does critical thinking always debunk thought? I think critical thinking must be open to challenging thought. And as such, when you look at the progress of society stemming from philosophical inquiry and thinking, there has been a lot of debunking thought in terms of what we think about the dark hole, what we think about evolution today. And the development of society today, and if today's society is an indication of what progress truly is, then what we have today is as a result of a lot of challenging, thinking critically about reality and about life, and coming and being willing to challenge what you know, just as how Descartes was challenging his existence. It is through that philosophical engagement and exercise. So the question is, does critical thinking always debunk you may think critically about something and it does not lead you to a conclusion, but it that challenge your ideas, it may lead you to supporting your ideas as well. So I may say that, Avril, of course. So I should probably, it should not, it's not necessarily that it debunks thought, but it opens up itself to debunk the thought of the day, I should say. And it may lead you to supporting your idea, but you never conclude, you never come to a conclusion. You always leave yourself open. Because as I said to you, if human beings are limited by time and space based on where we are in life and the influence of history as told to us and what we do not and the history that has eluded us, then we of course and with the understanding that the ways in which we see life differs. So yes, I believe that critical thinking must always be in a position to challenge truth as we know it, but it also opens itself up to support our truth. But in a sense, it's apologetics because apologetics involve the exercise of research and the exercise of epistemology and fact checking, and so on and so forth. Yep. So, but that's a very good question, Avril. You asked very good question. Avril, are you there? Avril left us. All right. So Avril left us. She will see the answer to the question when she watched the video. Our college Lancelot Sim is involved in an accident and is unable to join. I'm just seeing some of the text messages. One of the students had an accident. Sir, apologies for Jermaine Robinson. She's running late. So you're a bit muffled. 7:38. Okay. All right. Vivinia and Nivea, you guys both want to talk to me?
I want to talk to you. I don't know. I don't know for the other students. Remember, we were supposed to speak from last week, but we forgot.
Okay. All right. But before we end, any other student have any other question? I answered. I said, Avril, very good question. I don't think Avril is here, but any other question? Any concerns that you might have as it relates to the lecture today? All right. Any concerns about the presentation on Thursday?
Yeah, Thursday, sir.
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Wednesdays.
Oh, Wednesday. Sir, how is it going to be done? Are you going to be doing like which particular group or number or how many are you going to do all? Or how is it going to be done?
All the groups we present on Wednesday. That will take up much of the class.
Okay.
Each group will get at least 15 to 20 minutes. At least 15 to 20 minutes. Yep. I mean, they will present, and if students have one or two questions, they could probably ask those two questions each at the end, and then so about 15 to 20. But that I think we did say that already. 15 to 20 minutes to present.
Right. Yeah.
With some questions and answers, and you guys are presenting on the a brief history, just a short, nothing too elaborate or long. Okay, please.
Okay.
And this is just to get as a way to get you involved in the class and to also to expand your knowledge and on the Caribbean issues. And then of course I've been talking a lot about critical thinking. You are not going to remember 100%, probably 50%, but what you are being is you're being exposed to a particular kind of learning, a particular kind of academic thought. Okay, so that when you approach okay, your studies, when you approach your reflections about Caribbean, then of course you are going to approach it with a little bit more intensity and deliberately, understanding what we are contending for based on all that I have said in many different ways, which can be summed up in one word. Okay? But usually I wait till the end of the course to do so. All right? All right. Okay, Dion?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Yes, yes, yes. Anybody else?
I guess not. Good night, sir.
All right, we will end class. I said we were going to finish class in early, but that never happens. But thank you for sticking with me and for staying with me. I mean, as you can tell already, your professor is very flexible and open once you communicate with me, and and you guys should do well. Okay. After next week, after Wednesday's class, I will give you. You will see, tomorrow. You'll see. On Wednesday, you'll see more. Your thing, JTS Online will be populated with more resources for you. Videos.
Okay.
We will watch Life and Debt. Next week, Wednesday, the film Life and Debt. We will watch it in class and have a discussion about life and death. Are going to fully love the film. So Wednesday, you guys present. Next week, Monday, we have a presenter talking about music and the history of music as it relates to Caribbean identity and stuff. And then on Wednesday, we're going to watch. We're going to watch next week after next Wednesday. No, I mean.
Oh.
Next Wednesday, we're going to have a film, Life and Debt. And then following that, the Urban Indian Heritage Society, they will present. And then someone from Haiti will present. And, okay. So,
Okay.
all right. So that's what's coming up. But I want to lay the foundation for you guys. But I pray that you guys will have a great day, that God will cover you and keep you safe, that He will bless you, that God will open up your mind and get you acclimated, become interested in the class so that you will read the syllabus, have discussions with people in your church, in your communities, in your workplace, as a way to develop your learning and to develop your understanding. I pray, Lord God, that you give them a passion to think philosophical and critically, open up their minds, open up their thought processes, help them to excel in this class and all the other classes that they do. I pray that you surround them, keep them safe from harm and danger, and help them as students to be empowered so that they can facilitate other persons' development. We pray, Lord God, that you inspire us so that we can inspire others. Some of us in here might have needs. I understand that Lancelot Sims had an accident. I pray that you keep him safe, you cover him, and you bless him. And Lord God, some of the students are still developing, they're still learning, they're still exposing themselves to the concept. Some persons have not grasped the course yet, but I pray that over time, by week 6, they will fully understand the main concepts and ideas, and that you'll continue to help me to develop materials and resources that I can share with the students so that they can read and get the general gist of the class. We pray that you help them to do well on Wednesday, help them to have a fun time learning about these different Caribbean islands and presenting and sharing with each other and get to know one another. So we tell you thanks for JTS. Help the school to grow, bring donors, bring investors, oh God. Let this school become international, raise the academic levels, bring even more professors, and help us to be so devoted to academia and to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. We tell you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you and guys. And
Amen,
take care.
sir.
Yeah, man. Take care. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize my screen was I thought I was open up all the time. Yes, take care, guys.
All right,
Guys,
sir.
have a good night.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Be safe.